Today's lesson is about solving trig equations. First of all, let's go through steps for solving trig equations. You have to decide the pattern of equation and try to get the single trig equals constant form so that you can get the reference angle and figure out the solution between 0 to 2 pi using these two diagrams. Then find the period to get the general form. Today's lesson, we want to get the solutions in different domains. Sometimes, for example, from negative pi to pi, or from negative 2 pi to 2 pi. We got to use this general form to figure out. For part 6, solve for x on the domain of negative pi to pi. Write down the general form. First of all, we know this is a linear pattern because that's cosine to the first power, and for b, that's sine to the first power. If it's a linear pattern, isolating, that's the key words. So for a, I need to divide it by 2 both sides. Remember, for angle, you cannot separate. You have to keep any angle before that trig function. So you will get, this is a reduced cosine 2x minus pi over 3 equals 1 over 2. After you isolating, you will get the reference angle that will be pi over 3. Since cosine is a positive, using this diagram, we know that the first quadrant and the fourth quadrant for cosine is positive. So we got the pi over 3 and a 5 pi over 3. Remember, this angle equals pi over 3 and also 5 pi over 3. So we will set up 2 times x minus pi over 3 equals pi over 3. Another one is 2 times x minus pi over 3 equals 5 pi over 3. Then solve for x separately. First of all, you divide it by 2. So we got x minus pi over 3 equals, this is drop down, you got the pi over 6. Then I add pi over 3 both sides. Denominator, this one multiplied by 2, multiplied by 2. You will get, denominator is 6. 1 pi plus 2 pi, that's 3 pi. Reduce, that's pi over 2. So you got the x1 equals pi over 2. For this equation, we divide by 2 both sides. You will get x minus pi over 3 equals 5 pi over 6. Then add pi over 3 both sides. X equals, you need to multiply by 2 top and bottom so that we can get the same denominator. You will get the denominator is 6. So you get the 7 pi to the top. This is x2. Since we are looking for solutions between negative pi to pi, we need to figure out the period. Period equals 2 pi over b. b, that's 2. So you get the pi. Therefore, I can write down the general form for x1, that's pi over 2 plus p equals pi, pi times n. And for x2, you will get the 7 pi over 6 plus pi times n. Time, we try to get the same denominator for the general form so that it's easy to get the solution between negative pi to pi. So we put over 1. Then we multiply by 2. You will get denominator that's 2 is pi plus 2 pi times n. For this part, I put over 1. Then I can get denominator is 6. So multiply by 6. Multiply by 6. So you will get the 7 pi plus 6 pi times n. And don't forget n is all integers. Since we are looking for solutions between negative pi and a pi, I write down solution that's pi over 2 first. The pattern will be, you will get the same denominator, but your numerator keep adding or subtract 2 pi. So I add 2 pi. You will get 3 pi over 2. Since we are looking for solution between negative pi to pi, this is 1 pi. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5 pi. It's already greater than 1 pi. Therefore, it's not in this domain. Then for this part, you minus 2 pi. You will get the negative pi. Negative pi over 2 is in this domain. So keep minus negative 2 pi. Negative 1 pi minus 2 pi, we get negative 3 pi. It's out of domain. So basically, negative pi over 2 and pi over 2 are the solutions in this domain. Let's check this part. We got 7 pi over 6. It's all over 6. Then you need to keep adding 6 pi to the top. So 6 pi. That means 13 pi. 13 divided by 2, that's 2 point something. Therefore, it's not in this domain. We need to get from negative 1 to 1. Then I need to subtract 6 pi. You got the pi over 6. Then subtract negative 6. You will get negative 5 pi. Then subtract negative 6. You will get negative 11 pi over 6. It's out of this domain. So you get the 3 solutions. So negative pi over 2, pi over 2. Negative 5 pi over 6, pi over 6. 7 pi over 6 will be the solutions between negative pi to pi. Now let's go to B. For B, it's still linear pattern, so you need to isolating sine 3x minus square root of 3 both sides. Then you divide by 2. You will get sine 3x equals negative square root of 3 over 2. For reference angle, that's pi over 3. Since sine, that's negative, we go to third and then the fourth quadrant. For third quadrant, we got the 4 pi over 3. Fourth quadrant, we got the 5 pi over 3. So we write down 3x equals to these two angles. we got 3x equals 4 pi over 3. And 3x equals 5 pi over 3. Therefore, we divide by 3 both sides. X equals, drop this 3 down, that's 4 pi over 9. For this one, I divided by 3. So you get the x equals 5 pi over 9. Let's check the period. For sine, that's 2 pi over b. b is 3. So for general form, you will get, let's label this is x1, here's x2. 4 pi over 9 plus 2 pi over 3. This is I times n to the top. This part we got 5 pi over 9 plus 2 pi times n over 3. We want to put these two together so that we can get a pattern. That's 9. So you will get, here's 9. You get the 4 pi plus 6 pi times n. For this part, we got this is multiplied by 3, top and bottom. So we got denominator is 9, 5 pi plus 6 pi times n. We are looking for the angle between negative pi to pi. For 4 pi over 9, I add 6 pi to the top. So I got the 10 pi over 9. It's out of this domain. So keep doing this part. Subtract 6 pi, you got negative 2 pi over 9. Keep subtracting 6 pi, you will get negative 8 pi over 9. Then keep subtracting 6 pi, you got negative 14 pi over 9. This one is out for this domain. So you have 3 solutions. Now let's check the second general form. That's 5 pi over 9. 5 pi over 9, you still add 6 pi. So you got 11 pi over 9. It's out of this domain. Subtract 6 pi, that's negative pi over 9. Negative 7 pi over 9. Then you have negative 13 pi over 9. This is out of range. Therefore, we got another 3 solutions. Therefore, negative 8 pi over 9, negative 2 pi over 9, 4 pi over 9, and negative 7 pi over 9, negative pi over 9, 5 pi over 9 will be the solution between negative pi to pi. Let's go to this F. Still we need a solution between negative pi to pi. Linear pattern, that's why I minus 1, then divided by 2. Therefore, I got the sine 2 times x minus pi over 6 equals negative 1 over 2. Reference angle, that equals pi over 6. So we go to diagram. We know that sine is negative, which means third and fourth quadrant. we got 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. This angle should be equal to these two. So we will set up 2 times x minus pi over 6 equal to 7 pi over 6. And 2 times x minus pi over 6 equal to 11 pi over 6. We solve for x. We divide by 2 both sides. So I can get the x minus pi over 6 equals 7 pi over 12. Then you need to add pi over 6. Same denominator, I multiply by 2. You will get denominator is 12, 9 pi. Reduce, you will get 3 pi over 4. That's your x1. For this part, we divide by 2 both sides. You will get x minus pi over 6 equal to 11 pi over 12. Add pi over 6 both sides. You will get x equals multiply by 2. 11 pi plus 2, that's 13 pi over 12. That's your x2. Period for this sine function, that's 2 pi over b is 2. So I got the pi. This is b. Therefore, for general form, that's 3 pi over 4 plus pi times n. We put over 1. We want to get the same denominator, so multiply by 4. You will get denominator is 4, 3 pi plus 4 pi times n. For x2, general form will be 13 pi over 12 plus pi times n over 1. I multiply by 12. You will get denominator is 12. 13 pi plus 12 pi times n. We know that we are looking for between negative pi and a pi. So for 3 pi over 4, you need to keep adding 4 pi. I add 4 pi, that will be 7 pi over 4. It's out of domain. Then I need to subtract 4 pi. You will get negative pi over 4. Then negative 5 pi over 4. It's out of range. Because negative 5 divided by 4 is negative 1 point something. We need a greater than negative 1 pi but less than 1 pi. For this part, we got 13 pi over 12. I need to keep adding 12 pi. Since 13 pi over 12 is already out of this domain, therefore I cannot add 12 pi anymore. I need to subtract 12 pi. That's 1 pi over 12. Subtract 12 pi, that's negative 11 pi over 12. Minus 12 pi, that's negative 23 pi over 12. It's out of range. Therefore, only 4 solutions for this domain. Negative pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, negative 11 pi over 12, and a pi over 12.